Hello and welcome to this episode of Digital Mental Health Musings. I'm your host, Tania McMahon, coming to you from Turrbal and Yagara country. Now, here in Australia, we just celebrated Father's Day a few weeks ago. And apart from it being a time to celebrate the really important role that dads play in their kids' lives, it's also a time to reflect on that role and think about what dads need to be able to fulfill those roles. And I think nowhere is that more important than dads who are at the very start of their fatherhood journey, that is expecting and new dads. And today's guest is from a service whose aim is to try and meet some of those needs. So we have Scott White from SMS4dads, which is a free service that provides text messages with support, information, and tips for dads and dads-to-be, also including tailored messages specifically for First Nations dads. Scott is a dad and a granddad and has a background in health communication, and his role with SMS4dads is as the project lead. So he liaises between SMS4dads and one of their partners, PANDA, which for anyone who doesn't know is Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia, a really key organisation in this area. To make sure that the text messages related to perinatal mental health and wellbeing are delivered appropriately and with sensitivity. So welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, Tania. Great to be here. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm meeting on today, which happens to be Gadigal country, but I'm in Sydney, normally in Newcastle, and I'm usually residing on Worimi country up there. But yeah, it's great to be here. So I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and also say good day to any Indigenous dads that are out there as well.
Thanks, Scott. So, tell me about SMS4dads to start with. What is it? What does it do? And what doesn't it do?
Yeah, well, I think, Tania, as you said, it's what we're trying to do is help dads understand and connect with their baby, but also as well with their partners, and also an opportunity to check in and see how they're going. So, as you said, it's a really challenging time, can be a challenging time. It's certainly a different stage of people's lives. So I think any sort of advice and information, we certainly find that people, once they sign up and actually get into the program, the feedback we get is, yeah, great, thanks very much for that information. So dads can join up online. It's really simple. They just can go to our website and join up, and they just have to answer really few brief questions, because the whole concept of the program is for it to be really non-intrusive. And that's what we found about text-based messaging for dads. It's something that comes to them on their phone, and they don't have to attend to it straight away. You get a text message, you can look at it and you go, you know what, I'll go back to that later. Because we find dads a lot of busy, especially dads that are working full time. We send the information to them at a particular time, but they can go in the evening and then they can look at it when it suits them. So that's one of the really great, feedback that we get from dads, is why it's really well appreciated.
Mm-hmm. So it really meets them where they're at.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. When and where they're at and when they want to engage with us. And what we find is once the dads are actually registered, we send them about 3 text messages a week. When a dad signs up to the program, he can sign up from 12 weeks pregnant. So when their partner is from 12 weeks pregnant, or up until, as you said at the beginning, into the first 12 months of the baby's life, they can engage with the program at any particular time. If they start at 12 weeks, then they'll get probably about 3 messages a week, which means there's probably a total of about 240 messages over that time. But they may sign up at 20 weeks pregnant. They may sign up at a month after the baby's been born. It just depends. They can opt in and they can opt out whenever they like. As I said, it's a free service. It's non-intrusive. So if dads want to opt out at any time, they can just send a stop and we'll stop sending them information. And it's really important that, as I said, it's a free program. We're not sending any sort of other information, no commercial. We're not going to try and get them to, sign up to new types of nappies or
bombard them with advertising.
It's
a minefield as a new parent. Yeah,
that's exactly. It really is. And so that's what it's about. So it's just about providing them with tips and encouragement. And as I said, put that expected birth date in, and then what happens is the messages are synced to the development stage of the baby. So for example, dads may get a good example that I like to give is at 20 weeks pregnant, we know that the baby in utero can actually recognise voices.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the messages that we actually say to the dads is, and some of the messages we actually send in the voice of the baby. So it's like the baby talking to the dad.
Yeah.
So it'll say like, "Hey dad, do you know I can recognize your voice? Why don't you start talking to me so we'll get to know each other now." So it's that really sort of nice sort of engagement with that. So that's how the messages are sort of timed. And then, perhaps postnatally, they may get a message that says, "Hey dad, would be great if you could help mum breastfeed. So, why not get mum a glass of water or a pillow? Make sure mum's comfortable." Because, that's the sort of thing. So there's messages about for their partner as well and helping them engage with their partners. So that's, and then we also send some messages around, we have a mood booster program. So we'll actually send messages about every 3 to 4 weeks. We'll just ask dads, how is he going? So, because as we said, it can be a really challenging and stressful time. And then we'll ask dad, how are you going? And then and we'll ask him to just send back 1, 2, or 3. And if he sends it back and says, "You know what, maybe I'm struggling a bit," we will then recontact and say, "Have you got someone you can talk to?" And if they don't, we can then connect them with PANDA so that they can get some professional help as well.
Because PANDA is a great referral source, and they have their own sort of brief counselling line, don't they? Or like a helpline.
There's a helpline, It's a helpline,
yeah.
And so what we'll actually send them back to them, we'll actually send them back and say, somebody will ring you from this particular number. So we give them the number that's actually going to be called back on, because these days, who answers their phone?
Yeah.
Because you never know who it's going to be.
Yeah.
So we specifically say you'll get a call back from this number so that they know that it's coming from that number. And they can choose to answer the phone or they can choose not to answer the phone. That's up to them. The whole point of the program, as I said, it's a non-invasive, non-intrusive type program. So we're letting the dads decide.
And you're
putting them in control,
making it as easy as possible for them to get the level of support that they might need, shooting them off in the right directions, but leaving the choice up to them ultimately.
That's right, exactly. The dad's in control of it completely, and we're just there offering some tips and information and advice that we get. So some of the feedback I just was looking, I said I got some feedback was like a dad said, what I liked most was the timeliness of the message. You enter as you said, you enter the baby's birth date when you sign up, and then the information you get is about where your baby is going through. Another dad said, "I really love really love these texts. They were so encouraging and full of great advice." And he says, "My wife loved that I was getting them, and she started reading them to me too. They always seem to come at the right time. Thanks for the work you guys do. It really helped me out." So what we find, it's a really great, because it can be a conversation starter between partners, because that's a really important thing about the program. It's about, we know it's a partnership, and raising a child is a partnership, and it can be sometimes stressful. And so it just sort of helps dads with that sort of tips and information. So it's really, really, it's one of the really great things we get.
And it really sounds like it's enhancing and putting a focus on that partnership by the kind of 3, I guess, pillars of text messages that they get. They get the ones about the bond between them and the baby, which helps get them excited about that role.
Yeah.
It's got the text messages about supporting their partner, which is, making them aware of that role. And then it's got the text messages about themselves. So it's making them aware that raising a baby is about them and the baby, them and their partner, them and themselves, and then the 3, them working together.
That's right.
Or more if they've got multiples. I was going to say more if they've got multiples coming.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
that's
those
exactly right.
Really key areas for them to work on.
And I think, as we said, what happens, and some of the feedback we've got. I mean, as you said in your introduction, I'm a grandfather now, but I think back to when I had my children. I really wasn't that engaged right up until the kids were, quite a bit older, almost walking, you know what I mean? And it was sort of, it didn't occur to me. Thankfully now, I think, most antenatal services, most fathers will go along to antenatal services, and they'll go with their partners. But still, some of the feedback we get is even though the fathers are invited along to the antenatal service, you know, and to the lessons and the things, they still often find that they're just sort of sitting at the side and they're not engaged by the service. So the service is still focused on the mum. And the really important thing we know now from the science and what the science is telling us is that, you know, if dads are involved from day one and interacting with the baby responds to that and actually helps the baby develop, and it helps. So the earlier that the dad can get involved, and, you know, if it's antenatally, that's even better, building that sort of that thing up and understanding that their role is really important from the beginning. Often I think, you know, historically in our culture, you know, something was sort of, you know, it was mums sort of were taken away, and often, you know, and just the fact that they're called maternity units, you know, the whole thing is around, you know, it's around. Whereas now most of them are calling them, you know, parenting and family services, which is great. But people, you know, that's still that focus on dads, and dads not really feeling that they're actively engaged. And that's the whole thing about this program. This is for dads to engage them and provide them with that information.
Yeah, and it really sounds like it's wanting to tell dads exactly how important their role is. It's not trivializing it or going, oh, you know, this is what you could do if you feel like it, and, you know, if you're so inclined, it's, you know, actually you play a really important role. The research says
exactly.
so. Let us help you do that.
It's not an added, it's not like an added bonus if the dad is involved. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, which, you know, sort of, well, isn't that great? You know, whereas, you know, we're saying, you know, actually get involved from the beginning, because, you know, and the research will say that, you know, children's long term, you know, we're getting this stuff. So Richard Fletcher, who's the associate professor, who's you know, the lead investigator for this program, has been working in this area of men's engagement for many, many years, and that's what, you know, he's saying the science has changed over that period of time, so that we now, you know, we've actually got the science is actually telling us this is really important, and they know from these longer term studies we can see children themselves have better outcomes. You know, their educational and social outcomes are so much better if the father is involved right from the beginning.
Yeah. Can you speak to those a bit more specifically? Like, do you off your, you know, the top of your head, what kinds of social outcomes, what are we looking at when dads are involved?
I think just the educational outcomes. They're saying they can look at and see where kids are progressing and how they progress later on, that if the father's involved from a very early age and from as long as possible, we're seeing that sort of that data, I suppose, is starting to come through now, and it's showing that. So which is really, it's just really encouraging. So it's not just, as we said, it's not an add-on and it would be nice. We're actually saying this is really going to have an impact on your child, and if you can start interacting, and we know that, you know, if those interactions are happening on a daily basis, you know, children, and, you know, their brain just develops so quickly and so early. So if we can have those interactions on a daily basis, you know, and how do we go about doing those sorts of things? Dads are sort of saying, you know, I was going to say, I was trying to look for another, but we said feedbacks from the dads is, you know, 92% are saying us that it's really helping them in their role as a dad. So, you know, and over 80% are saying it's helping in their relationship with their partner. So it's really having a positive impact.
It's really positive.
It is, yeah.
And what about for when things, you know, maybe go wrong in a pregnancy, or, you know, how does the program adapt to that? So obviously if someone signs up early and then things change, like how are they going to keep getting messages if they've lost if the pregnancy's been lost, things like that?
Be specific. Yeah, so we're working with Red Nose as well. So as you said in the introduction, my role is working with PANDA, so I'm looking at, you know, perinatal mental health distress. So on that particular thing, we'll actually be sending dads and asking them if their partner is actually, you know, has experienced some sort of mental health distress. We can send them specific information and actually in tips and information how they can help. And some of that general information would just be like, you know, did you know 1 in 5 mums will have some sort of an episode of mental health distress? What are the signs and symptoms? And so in that text, we'll then send them a link where they can go and actually look at those find out more information. So about a third of the messages that we actually send out will have a link, a hyperlink, where they can go for more information and that sort of stuff. And as I said, yes, we're saying in terms of around stillbirth and miscarriage, we're partnering with Red Nose. And so we'll have we're working on a specific set of messages and information that we can send to dads to help them, obviously through, which would absolutely be a really distressing time for them. So what sort of information and services that, they can help. So that's what we're doing at the moment. So in my particular role, we through the PANDA Facebook page, we did a survey with people with lived experience, and so we asked them for what sort of information could have you received at the time that you think would have been helpful, in that time, what sort of information. Then what we're doing with that is that we're then basically working with some clinicians that have expertise in perinatal mental health distress, and we're saying this is the sort of feedback. Does this information accord with current clinical practice? Do you think this information will be useful and understanding? So that's just those sort of tips and those sorts of information that can sort of help.
Yeah.
And as I said, yes, similar sort of thing for stillbirth and miscarriage, and also we're also doing some stuff around parents whose children end up in New South Wales we call it NICU. I'm not sure in
like intensive
Queensland,
care,
intensive care unit, if they're born prematurely. What sort of information, what can they expect? What sort of stuff happens when they go there? Because it might be something that people just are not, they're not aware of, and so it's providing them with some information, helping like that. And then also, as you said in your introduction, we actually have a specific program called SMS4dads. And so what we've done with that, we've got a specific Aboriginal reference group that we're working with them, and Uncle Mick Adams and also Dave Edwards, who perhaps Dave does some work with you through you. They're making sure that that the messaging and stuff that's going out is in culturally appropriate language, and so dads can engage with it, because that's really important as well.
So you guys are working really hard to tailor this service for these different dads, different audiences, different experiences. It doesn't sound at all like they sign up, they're going to get a stock standard, congrats, you're having a baby.
And if it is, I don't think there's ever such thing as a stock standard pregnancy or that sort of stuff. But if hopefully, maybe dads will go through it, and it will be, a reasonably, experience without any of those. But if some of those other things happen, then we're hoping to provide some information and support that will help them through that journey as well.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the thing that maybe that people might think with an SMS service, that you might just get some basic text messages that, how can they really help? But it sounds like you're working really hard to, be flexible and adaptive, and, make sure that they're tailored to the how far along in the pregnancy that the couple are, and their needs at the time. And it sounds like that's really, really helpful, and you're building on it as well.
Yeah. So I think it's always good to get the feedback from people that have engaged. So I've got one here that a mum sent back to us with a 9-week-old baby, and she said, my partner comes home from every week work, and he might say to me, I'm going to take the boys out for a walk, or I'll bath the boys tonight. And so he puts his hand up to do a night feed, and she said, I'll ask him a question. And she said, I think I know where that came from. You know what I mean? Like, you got that from those messages, didn't you? And he said, yeah. So,
and how wonderful a conversation for them to have, that was the catalyst for that conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the stuff we really get. Yeah. So it's really great.
And if anything, it's joining these partners in, something they're kind of doing together, and something they're helping each other out with. It's becoming this shared experience for them in a way, and bringing them together rather than kind of pushing them apart. that because of all the stress of becoming a new parent, that it can happen that way. It sounds like it's something that really will not just provide helpful information, but actually be this vehicle for couples to come together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's we're saying, it's raising a baby, and the thing is, it requires a teamwork and providing help and information and tips that will make that journey through, then that transition to parenthood, because it is a transition to parenthood, and that's the feedback we get from a lot of first time parents. It's a bit of a shock to them, you know what I mean? Until it actually happens, when it actually happens, it can be quite a shock, because their life changes completely
overnight. Yes.
Yes,
I can attest to this myself, and being a new parent. My son's just turned 1, so it's
so I'm sure you can relate to that. That's right. So people, it is, and they and what we're finding is, especially for people in regional and rural communities and stuff, who may have moved to regional communities where they don't have that network of support, of family, perhaps they've moved away, and so this is really a really great service for people that in those regional and rural communities, that providing with those tips and information that's coming to them.
Absolutely. So if you were going to say, because obviously new parents are overwhelmed with, there's so much information sort of thrown at you, why, if you were going to sort of summarize it down to why should a dad take the time to enroll in this service, what would that be?
I think it would be because we now know that a dad's role is crucial in the development of a baby, and so the earlier that you can get involved and be with your baby and working with them, then the better outcomes there are going to be for your child. So whether it's helping, it's with changing the baby, it's feeding the baby, maybe taking the baby out for a walk to give your partner a bit of a break and those sorts of things. So, that's a double bonus. You're getting exercise. You're also providing something for you. So I think there's lots of multiple reasons, why for dad. And it's just providing that little bit of assistance. And as you said, the problem with the information these days is there is that almost that information, infodemic, I think I've heard is the term that some people say, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've not heard that one, but that absolutely hits the nail on the head.
Yeah, and so we're saying, it's a trusted source of information that's coming from it. So, the program's been developed. It's through the University of Newcastle. So it started as a pilot project, as a research project. And because we were getting such great outcomes, the project was getting some great, that's where the Department of Health then put in some funding to actually expand the program. So the program's now we've had over 10,000 dads enroll in the program since it's first started. So there's a lot of history and information. And the really important thing is the message development is an ongoing process. So it's an iterative process and it's a consultative process. So, I was giving you lots of examples of feedback that we get from parents. And the great thing is we can use that information to, update and look at our messages and saying that. And so we constantly, we have a reference group, so dads that have been part of it, and that's the great thing. So many of the dads that have been involved in it, appreciate it so much, and they're very happy then to provide feedback to us. And then that's, as I said, it's an iterative process, and we continually revise those messages. As I said, it's about 240 messages all the time. But the messages that were probably, as I said, I've only been involved in the program for about 7 or 8 months, but as I said, it's been going for many years. And so the messages have changed over that time based on the feedback on what works and what doesn't work. And as I said, we're really important about talking to people with lived experience, but also in working with clinicians. So I think,
that's great.
With your here today, we've got some clinicians out there that are listening to this program. So we'd really say, if you're in this part of your practice, you're involved with, people transitioning to parenthood, then think about the dad, as well. And here's something that the dad can be offered, because often the feedback we get is, parents will go to the antenatal classes and all that sort of stuff, and they'll be given a bag with, some brochures and lots of information in it. And then, what's in here for dad? Nothing specifically targeted at the dad. And this is a program that has been developed with that in mind. So it is something for the dads and stuff. And I mean, I think it's really, I've been to a couple of, since I've started in the program, a couple of parents and baby expos, and had a stand. And you go to those, if you've been a parent now, you may have been to some in the past.
All the dads wander over.
All the dads are wandering. All the dads are wandering around. And then you say to them, "Hey, I've got something for you." "Oh, really? I didn't think there'd be anything here today for me. I thought it was all targeted at mum."
Yeah.
And so we go, "No, you know what? This is not. This is specifically targeted for you. I mean, it'll help you and mum together, but it's specifically written for dads, because we know dads communicate. While it's probably a generalization stuff, we do know there is some differences of gender differences between the communication preferences. And as I said to you, that's why the text-based message and that research and that, those years of the program's been going, that's where it's come from. There's been the research that's shown that a text-based message service has better engagement with dads. So there's some solid research evidence behind that. So that's why the program is going well.
And where
you're not required to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you're not required to download an app or do anything, like, you know what I mean? You don't have to, it just comes straight to your phone. So I mean, so for dads they just go to the website, which is just SMS4dads.com.au, pretty easy.
Yeah.
And there's just a join up, they just join up. And as I said, we only ask a really brief number of questions, just some basic demographic information. And then that's, they can sign up.
So
mums
really
can sign dads up too as well.
If they want send it to his phone.
To get it sent to him. What's this?
With his consent, of course.
Well, that, of course, yes.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's very easy for dads to opt out if they decide, they don't want to continue in the program. But we get a really strong engagement rate.
And where can people find that research? Because I'm sure there'd be listeners out there who'd be really keen.
So if they go to our website, so if they go onto our
detail.
website, if they go onto our website, there's a couple of tabs across the top, and there's one there that says for professionals, and there's a tab there that will lead you to all the research. It's got some brief abstracts for some of the stuff that's been done, so there's a lot of detail there as well.
Right. Oh, we'll put that in the show notes, that for professionals tab, for people who want to read up on the research behind this. I think that's a really important thing for a lot of clinicians, is knowing that these services have a good evidence base. And like you're saying, the SMS format has been chosen because it's got that better engagement. All of this is research backed. So if people do want to read more about that, they can check the show notes.
And they can also know there is that they can sign up for a professional taster, so that the actual clinician can get actually some text messages sent to them, so they can actually see, so they'll know if they're then talking to a client, they can look at it and they've experienced the program themselves, so they know all about it. So we're finding that's a really valuable way for clinicians to learn a little bit more about the program.
Yeah. Are there any health practitioners in particular that you've gotten feedback from who've said, "Oh, this has been so useful to know about"? Like, are there any health practitioners that you think desperately need to know about this service? Ones who might really encounter dads in those, brief scenarios.
I think anybody that's interacting with parents in transition. I mean, obviously, one of the, I suppose, the main people where we're engaging is in antenatal, so midwives, and those, in those units, obviously, is where we put a lot of our promotion, and that's when people are thinking about, it's relevant to them. But certainly, if there's any other health professionals out there that come across just as part of their clinical practice, that they know people are going to be transitioning into parenthood, then this is something that say, "Hey, are you aware of this?" It's a really great information and tips. And as I said, we're not providing professional health advice. It's just information and tips that may help.
It's that kind of really low intensity, but also like really accessible and not intrusive information and tips, which I think is great. So it really makes it kind of palatable to recommend and refer to, because it's not saying, "Oh, you know what, I think you should sign up for this perinatal depression course, or, something really heavy going where what are you talking about? I'm not depressed. It's really that like low intensity way in, to provide that support in a preventative way to prevent these issues from developing, and to, lay the groundwork for a really positive family relationship and bond with their kid and their partner.
And that's like we said, everybody goes in and hoping that everything's going to be going well and all that sort of stuff, but we do know, the evidence will tell us that that's not going to be the case, but unfortunately for every parent. And some of them may experience some challenges along the way, and it's just knowing, as I said, there's so much out there, just knowing where to be pointed in the right direction as to where you can get some assistance and help.
And already being linked in with something like this, makes it much easier to seek help when it's needed. And actually, it's really interesting what you were saying about any clinicians who are dealing with people who are, going through that transition to parenthood, should know about this, because if you really think about it, it is one of those big transition points where you probably will end up in contact with a range of different health practitioners, maybe an obstetrician, maybe physio, because, we've got the baby's coming in 6 months. I better get on top of that back problem.
That's right.
And this is going to be then casually mentioned to these health practitioners in those settings. Oh, I've got the baby along the way. And if those health practitioners know about this service and can just go, oh, have you heard of SMS4dads? You should really sign up. And that's all they have to do is mention it. It's really reaching people at the time that they need it.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're hoping to do, letting as many people know about it as possible.
Yeah. Wow, that brings us to just about out of time. But thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge, and talking about this service. It's really, really been interesting and a great chat.
All right. Thanks. No, look, as I just said, my final message would be, that's right. If there's any dads out there, then, that are about to transition into parenthood, then, definitely sign up.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
No worries at all. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Tania. Bye.
Take care.